By the way, Steve Keim, he looks like your right thumb. And also Steve Keim looks like a 1990s wrestler who's a little bit past his prime.
Steve Keim may look like a thumb, but he traded for Robbie Anderson in the wake of an injury to Marquis Hollywood Brown, the wide receiver they traded for in the offseason. So they were trying to make this a more dynamic playmaking offense. And so far at this point, there's been nothing really dynamic about the Arizona Cardinals team. I mean, you have a air raid offensive coordinator in Kliff Kingsbury, and you have Kyler Murray coming off a new extension. And so far, I mean, they're worse than the Seahawks. What? Who would have saw that one coming?
Nobody saw that one coming at all, because no one foresaw Geno Smith coming, and nobody foresaw the Seattle Seahawks being one of the highest turnover margin teams in the league, which is kind of more just a product of luck. But at the same time, no one saw that coming.
And to add to it, you take away one of their wins if it wasn't for an amazing, unprecedented comeback against the Las Vegas Raiders. Credit to them for being able to pull off that victory, but still, their season has just been hanging on by a thread. They are currently in shambles. I don't think there's too much to dispute about where the Arizona Cardinals are as a team, as a franchise. It comes in a weird year for them because we talk about Keim who got the extension, Kliff Kingsbury who got an extension, Kyler who got an extension. Out of the three guys, we know that Kyler is the most safe, but what's the move for the Arizona Cardinals?
I produce a Arizona Cardinals podcast with our friend Walter Mitchell with Revenge of the Birds. You can check that out. It's really good content, especially this week's. It was recorded before the Robbie Anderson trade, but there's really good analysis if you want really in-depth Cardinals stuff. I'm just going to kind of take the best of that and mold it into 4 minutes. He has a great term for what he calls the Cardinals offense. He calls it the K-Raid offense because it's Kliff Kingsbury's adaptation of an air raid offense. They run the ball a lot. They use a lot of screen passes to set up plays. Very occasionally do they use the offensive lineman formations that are very specific to the air raid offense. It's a mutated form of the air raid offense, similar to how like Andy Reid picks and chooses plays from the air raid offense to put into his college type scheme for Patrick Mahomes, but also has like different eras of NFL offenses mixed in. Like that's kind of what Kliff Kingsbury's adopted with that team. And Jason LaConforta of CBS did a great story about this. That was basically like, look, Kliff is stubborn about changing the way that they run. They don't do a lot of game prep at the start. Kyler Murray's also a little bit hard-headed and kind of butts with him in terms of when he can change the plays at the line of scrimmage. It seems like a situation where the K-Raid offense isn't really applicable to what the Cardinals are trying to do, no matter how many weapons they give him and no matter how many offensive line formations they set up. So it reminded me a lot of how in the 2021 draft, once everyone knew Trevor Lawrence was going to be the one pick, we just stopped picking apart Trevor Lawrence specifically. If Kyler Murray hadn't signed that extension this offseason, I think the whole conversation this week would be about Kyler Murray's contract, about franchise tags, about, fifth-year options. That would be the conversation this week. But because Kyler already got the extension and there is no scenario where they can technically get out of his contract after 2024. They have like a small window in March of 2025 where it's only like a $30 million dead cap hit. But basically, because Kyler is 100% their quarterback for the next 3 years, this year plus the 2 after that, they're going to get a chance to work through it a little bit. He's going to get that opportunity. I don't think Kliff Kingsbury is going to. And Steve Keim's reputation, as Suge White, as I call him, shout out Bomani Jones for that nickname. Steve Keim's reputation would render a firing worthy, but he has a very buddy-buddy relationship with the owner of the team, and he's survived much worse at this point. Like drafting Josh Rosen and pivoting to Kyler Murray, most general managers don't get to be the one who oversees the next regime when you make that choice. So Steve Keim has survived worse. Questions in the air whether he's still the coach or not, but this might be a cut your losses situation in Kliff Kingsbury and Vance Joseph too. Vance Joseph, I've already seen a team quit on Vance Joseph once, so if the Cardinals defense quits on him, wouldn't be surprised by that one either. I think the coaching staff is going to be the first domino to fall if they miss the playoffs.
I think I heard someone once say that you get, as a GM, 3 coaches. If you're a head coach, get 3 quarterbacks, and if you scratch on all 3, then you're out. So I think Keim would not be in charge of another coaching search if it came down to it. And I don't think that Kliff Kingsbury would keep his job, obviously, if this season went down the tubes. So I think you're going to see a change in both the GM and head coaching position after the season. And you mentioned we would be talking about Kyler Murray's contract had he not signed it. By that virtue, was it a mistake that they got the deal done before the season?
I'm going to say no, because I'm going to say that this is not a permanent state of being for Kyler Murray. I need a larger sample size than 6 games because I've seen Kyler Murray look awesome this year, and I've also seen him be totally worthless. So,
but didn't you get that sample size at the tail end of last season as well?
That one's
when do we factor that into the math?
So I gave the Cardinals a pass for the end of last season. And the reason I gave them a pass is they had a catastrophic amount of injuries, not just Kyler himself dealing with the ankle injury, but DeAndre Hopkins was out every game at the end of the season until the playoff game in which they had Max Garcia, who I believe is like the backup on the Giants now, trying to block Aaron Donald, and they just had no chance in that game. I give them a pass for how last season ended. Without DeAndre Hopkins and without JJ Watt and without 3 of their starting offensive linemen, I gave Arizona personally a pass. And Kyler Murray's made 2 Pro Bowls in 3 seasons. And they're not like Pro Bowls where it's like, oh, damn, they had to appoint someone because everyone dropped out. It's not a Mac Jones Pro Bowl or a Mitchell Trubisky Pro Bowl. Like, he's been named Pro Bowler as one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFC in his second year and his third year. So I was in favor of giving him the extension because you had to, because Kyler was not going to play another down for the Cardinals without that extension, nor should he, because that's the perfect situation for him. He's in that tier 2 of quarterbacks where, because he's making so much money, you have to be incredibly good within the margins. Not after 6 games. I've seen 2 years of samples.
It's 6 games and whatever the tail end of last season was when he started to go downhill.
And again,
I get what you're saying on the injuries, but like, there's a lot of quarterbacks that have to work around injuries.
Yeah, totally fair. And for me, I'm not doing the analysis on that end of season because of how terrible the Arizona offense was.
What about the tail end of the previous season?
That one is a fair conversation. And at the time, I was in favor of Kyler Murray's a person you give $46 million to, because a year from now, he'll be the 7th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Whereas right now he's the 3rd highest paid quarterback. He'll be the 7th highest paid, and he's about the 7th or 8th best quarterback in the league. So I would have still given him the extension. Although Arizona, what giving him the extension does is he's going to have the leeway to build that roster up. And we can talk about the transactions they've made also as well, but he's going to get the leeway to work through this. And I think that's ultimately the right decision, because you choose quarterback over Kliff Kingsbury, who I said going into this year, I have no evidence either way as to whether he's a good coach or a bad coach. He's kind of in purgatory.
So what's the perfect coach for Kyler?
Personally, if I were making the hire, I would actually go defensive coach and then bring in an offensive coordinator, possibly. I mean, it's difficult because, like, I would say Joe Brady, who's the quarterback's coach for the Bills, but I think Joe Brady might turn down the offer to be offensive coordinator of the Cardinals. But, you know, maybe money talks in that situation. But I would actually go defensive coach. I might go Gannon in Philadelphia, D'Amico Ryans in San Francisco. I would even go Brian Flores over in Pittsburgh.
No. D'Amico, come on. Don't go in division. Don't do that to us. Go to the AFC. Be like McDaniel. Be like Saleh. Don't go to the NFC. Don't go Kyler.
But again, I always say I don't know what makes a good head coach. So actually, if you're asking me who would I hire as head coach, I would say I would sit down with an interview of 10 to 12 candidates. I would ask them about leadership and skill sets, because that would be the thing more important to trying to identify who the next Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, Sean Payton, those coaches that add value. I would sit down and actually do an interview to try and identify who the best leader would be, if you're actually asking me who it is. But if you're asking me to just throw out names, I would throw out defensive coaches first for the Cardinals, most likely.
I can rationalize your thought in the defensive head coach hiring process, because I think the best coach for Kyler is someone that actually wants to coach Kyler. And what I mean by that is, I felt like that hiring, they went into it with the same kind of idea of Steve Nash and the Brooklyn Nets of, I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to be your buddy. We're going to be more of a partnership between this head coach and player. Kyler is a young guy. He hasn't built up the resume to necessarily have a buddy in the league in the same way like Aaron Rodgers is with his quarterback coaches, or Tom Brady is with whoever he wants to bring on staff. Kyler doesn't have that same level of authority, or he shouldn't have that same level of authority, because, to be frank, he hasn't done shit in the NFL to this point. He's had an amazing college career, and he's done a couple nice things, but there's been a lot of guys that have gone to a couple Pro Bowls and then been out of the league within the next 5 years. Kyler could fall into that camp very easily. So I think
Kyler Murray did enough to earn that contract. Kyler Murray did enough to earn that contract and setting himself up for the next few years. Like that dude, from being the greatest high school quarterback in the history of Texas to winning a Heisman Trophy to being the number one pick and making two Pro Bowls and having a QBR in the top 10.
You can't be getting paid based off what you did in high school and college. That doesn't matter to what you do.
Go to the NFL. I was going to say, so top 10 in QBR, both of his last 2 seasons. I've seen him also make the plays where he just rolls to his right, 40 yards down the field, puts a ball within a quarter of an inch window. Like that's the skill set that you're paying. I also saw
him have that game against the Rams in the playoffs last year.
Totally fair. And that's why he's in that weird second tier, right? This was always the problem with Russell Wilson, was like Russell Wilson makes all this money and the Seahawks are not making good decisions to find value. And that's on the general manager. You got to find value within the margins, which brings us to the transactions that they've been making.
I've dropped him a tier. I think that he's fallen out of that second tier for me.
So he's Derek Carr?
Probably.
Ooh. We can play the Kyler. I have the Kyler Murray quiz.
Think about Derek Carr. What he's done. I mean, he's going to probably have like a 10-year, 15-year career and make the playoffs twice, 3 times in that span. Maybe even never win a playoff game. I hope it doesn't come like that to Derek Carr, but at a certain point, that's going to be the narrative built around him. Kyler Murray, again, 4 years into his NFL career, been to a playoffs and got embarrassed in the first round of said playoffs.
And should have been in 2020 also. They just fell apart at the end of the season with injuries.
Well, then the Bears end up making the playoffs.
Yeah, but that was just because they were playing, what's his name? Was it Strevler, I think, was playing the last game of the season.
He's about as accomplished right now as a Mitchell Trubisky, as a Mac Jones. And I don't see the situation getting better in Arizona, building around Kyler, unless they just knock it out of the park with this next head coaching hire.
Well, so this brings us to the transactions that I think are so interesting because our buddy 1990s wrestler past his prime, Steve Keim, has basically decided, where we're going to find value within the margins. We are going to trade all of our day 3 draft picks. We don't value day 3 draft picks even the slightest. They traded Tay Gowan, who was a 5th round pick the year before as a rookie, and an extra 5th round pick for Zach Ertz. They traded a conditional pick for Cody Ford, who's now a backup lineman. They traded a conditional 6th for Trayvon Mullen, who's now their 3rd corner at this point. They just gave up a 6th and a 7th for Robbie Anderson. They gave up a 3rd round pick for Rodney Hudson. They don't value those late round picks at all. And by the way, the ones that they have drafted this year, Cam Thomas and Myjai Sanders, both edge rushers, both picked 2nd round and 3rd round. They just wouldn't put them on the field. And then they put them on the field against the Seahawks and both of them got sacks. So like even the picks that they are making, they're not playing rookies, which by the way is the same complaint Cardinals fans have been making for the last 2 years because they just don't use Isaiah Simmons. They didn't use Hassan Reddick. He left Arizona, had a breakout 12 sack campaign with Carolina, goes to the Eagles, and we find out, Vance Joseph was just playing him at the wrong position for 4 years. Like Arizona, even the picks they use, they don't even use them correctly. And they've just decided we value no day 3 picks anymore. Well, they technically traded a 1st round pick for Hollywood Brown also. And they've basically decided we don't value draft picks. We value the short-term fixes of a corner 3 here, a backup offensive lineman here. We just value short-term fixes instead of drafting players with 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks.
Well, they tried to go all in last year when obviously you have DeAndre Hopkins to the team, you have JJ Watt added to the team. And now we have DeAndre Hopkins coming off the suspension. How does D-Hop being back and the addition of Robbie Anderson change the fortunes of the Arizona Cardinals for you?
Well, it's different. And I don't know if different is better for Arizona, but Arizona is now entering a transition period. And if Kliff Kingsbury gets fired, like we all think is probably going to happen, I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm just saying that
Arizona State Sun Devil job is open.
I mean, it fixes a lot of problems, doesn't it? But like, say they miss the playoffs, and if they miss the playoffs, Kliff's not going to make it because they shouldn't have given him that extension in the first place. But the good news about having billions of dollars is that you can just make those mistakes and then be like, whatever, you're out of here now. Arizona is in this interesting place where this is going to be a transition because, like you said, they went all in on Hopkins. I think he's making $27 million relative to the cap this year. They signed JJ Watt to a 2-year contract. JJ Watt can and probably will leave at the end of the season. I saw Cardinals fans today talking about if we lose the next game to the Saints, is it time to talk about trading JJ Watt and trying to get value back for him while you have a chance? And this is going to be a transition period for Arizona. It's going to be Kyler Murray's 5th-year option comes up next year. So technically Kyler doesn't make any more money this year than he did the year before. 5th-year option for $21 million the next year. Then it's $46 million. Then it's $43 million. They are transitioning into, we no longer have value at the quarterback position. And so now the game plan is, how are we going to build this roster around Kyler Murray? How are we going to build this roster around a quarterback that makes $46 million a year? The same way the Cowboys had to, the same way that the Raiders had to when Derek Carr got his extension, the same way that the Kansas City Chiefs are experiencing right now, where Tyrann Mathieu's gone now, and Tyreek Hill is gone, and Daniel Sorensen is gone, and Charvarius Ward is gone. And you have to find value in different places. And I don't trust Arizona to do that better than the competition. I think they'll find good value. I really love Cam Thomas. I love Myjai Sanders. I think Zaven Collins, we might look up in a couple of years, he's putting up Fred Warner numbers. Like, he's a really, really good prospect. And I think that there's a chance they'll find that value. I just don't trust Arizona to find better value than, say, Kansas City or Green Bay, or these teams that have proven that they're well-run organizations. And that's not what the Arizona Cardinals are.
All right, guys, that's our breakdown of the current state of the Arizona Cardinals. Are you disappointed by the season that is? Sure you are. Let us know your disappointment in the comment section. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media. From Kyle and Juju, stay safe, happy, and healthy. We will see you on the next one.